Welcome everyone to the Montessori Family Life webinar series. I'm Lorna McGrath and I'm your host. I'm so glad that you joined us today. If you're returning, welcome back. We've been away for a couple of weeks, so welcome back. We're glad you're here. And if you're new, we're so glad you found us. Our topic today is supporting your child's natural growth and development in terms of language and literacy. And we are so fortunate today because we have Christine Lowry with us. She is a colleague and friend of mine. She has been a Montessori teacher for a long time. She has specialized in actually special needs and children who learn differently than other children. And she has actually run schools. She's a consultant for schools. She's a mom of an adult child, and so she's raised a child. She just has a wealth of knowledge and information for you today, and I'm so thrilled to have you, Christine. Thank you for coming and joining us. All right.
Thank you, Lorna. Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Well, terrific. I think we're ready to get going if you are. Everybody can see the screen, I think, so we are ready to go.
All right, and I would just like to repeat what Lorna just said. We love your participation and your questions and your comments, and any way that you would like to participate, we would love to have you do that. So, okay, so we'll go on to the next slide.
All right, let's see if I can do that, Christine.
All right.
Yes.
There we go. Okay, so it's really, when we're thinking about language and literacy, we really need to start by thinking about language. Dr. Montessori actually, in her observations of students, and as she said, looking at actual children, realized that children, what she called absorb the language that they are around. We don't have to teach them how to talk. It's just a natural part of a human's development. As she said, I say development, not teaching, for the mother does not teach her child language. It develops naturally like a spontaneous creation. And it's not this conscious work. When she talked about the absorbent mind, what she really was talking about was this tendency of young children, not even a tendency, it's just who they are, of young children to take everything in. Excuse me. If you're the parent of a young child, birth to age 3 in particular, you know that you have a little scientist on your hands, right? They are constantly exploring, constantly looking, constantly touching, constantly seeking new knowledge. And along with that comes language. So we'll go to the next slide. Here we go. So when we think about this human tendency for social connection, is what Dr. Montessori called it, language is one of the main ways that we communicate with one another. But it's not just words that we use to communicate, it's our body language that communicates so much. And all of you have had an infant. You may have one now. Lorna and I have both had infants, though it was quite a long time ago, right?
Yes.
Right, but you know that that's that warm, attuned body language that we use to communicate with our baby. And right from birth, this is fascinating to me, a child's focus of seeing is from being held here to their mother's eyes. It's they're born ready to pick up on language that we're communicating. And in trauma-informed work, it's called soft eyes, but I really love that expression. And it's really interesting to me that after 3 years of wearing masks, who knew that the human eyes could be so expressive?
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. So it's the attention that we give to our children. It's the natural interaction that we have with our children, and it's our modeling of verbal communication. So, when a young child points and says, "What that? What that?" Or maybe they can actually say, "What's that?" Or they just point. Then we give them that language. We say, "That is an apple. That is a whatever it is that's caught their interest." So this idea of serve and return, is a phrase that's coined by the Center for the Developing Child at Harvard. If you're not familiar with that, I've put the web address on the bottom of the slide here. It is an amazing, amazing, amazing treasure trove of information about developing children. And one of the things that they talk about there is this idea of serve and return. It's how we respond to our child's communication, whether it's nonverbal communication of an infant, but how many of us, over a period of time, it doesn't happen the first day that we're a mom or a dad, but we do learn to hear subtle distinctions even in their cries, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. We know, oh, now this is a hunger cry. This is a I'm tired cry. This is a I'm bored and I want you to interact and play with me cry. Right? I want to communicate. I want to be with you. I want to interact with you. So as we are able to observe and attend to our child's gestures, to the sounds that they're making, their cries, and make eye contact with them if they are comfortable. Some babies might not be comfortable with that, but we can communicate with touch, that I'm here for you, I care about you, I'm supporting your growth and development. So, Lorna, do you have anything you'd like to add to that at this point?
Well, whenever I think about infants, I always just want to make sure that folks understand too that there are times when we should be talking and interacting with our infants and toddlers, and there are other times when we should allow them to concentrate and to be engaged with certain activities. So with an infant, you want to do a lot of what Christine is talking about during the caregiving times. During the times when you're changing their diapers or you're feeding them or you're bathing them. All those caregiving activities are times for bonding, and they're time for language. They're times for language and for you to interact. Now, obviously, at other times of the day, they will babble and they will
Right.
cry if they need something, and you should attend to that. But if they look like they're engaged, and just for an infant, it might be watching a mobile above their head, or maybe they're just making something spin with their hand, and they're engaged in that. Then that's not the time to say, "Oh, you're doing such a great job on that on that act." Let them concentrate when they're engaged, and
Right.
interact with them more when you're doing the caregiving kinds of things, and when they call for your attention through babbling and things like that.
Right. So thank you, Laura. So thinking of it more as it's having a conversation with your child, and it doesn't really matter what age your child is. So when we're talking about serve and return, what the folks at Harvard talk about is that the baby, think of it as a tennis game, right? The baby is serving an initiation of the conversation, and we're returning to keep that conversation going. So let's go on to the next slide.
I like that analogy. That's a good
So really, what Lorna just said is so important. The 5 steps of serve and return, and this is taken directly from the Harvard website that I have put on here, okay? So you will have the PDF of this if you want to download it, so you've got the URL to get there. but it starts with observation, as Lorna said. It's noticing what our child's attention is drawn to and when is the right time to return our attention. If that child is exploring something, that little scientist is exploring and really deeply engaged in that, we don't want to interrupt that level of concentration. But it's looking for those times when the baby's attention is drawn to something that maybe we're playing with them, or it's a time when it's an interaction time, and it really is observing what is the child's need right now, how best can I support my child in these moments, and it's just looking for those teachable moments, right? Those little opportunities, because then we can respond, and we respond with maybe our verbal language, right? But we have to be really attentive to how quickly are we talking. We can be attentive to and watch and see how intently your child might be watching your mouth. Part of what we know is the impact of the pandemic, particularly on toddlers, and slightly older toddlers now, because we've been without masks for a little bit of time now. But what the people that research this sort of thing have noticed is that there's been a different rate of development of language in infants and toddlers than we might have been used to in the past. And in fact, even the Center for Disease Control, maybe about 6 or 7 months ago now, for the first time, revised their developmental milestones because of the impact of what research are saying has been from the pandemic. And so, if you have a toddler or maybe even a 3-year-old who doesn't seem to be on a path of oral language in the way that you might have come to expect, your child still is developing oral language, but maybe their pace is a little bit different. That's fine. That's absolutely okay. And it's not something that you should be worried about. But one of the things that we want to be aware of is giving our children the opportunity to now observe human speech. Right. Because many young children missed a period of time when they were able to do that. So we're going to slow our speech a little bit, just a tiny bit. We're describing what they seem to be interested in. We're describing, as Lorna said, we're describing what we're doing when we're giving our child a bath, or when we're feeding a child. It's, food is a social experience for human beings, right? So you might describe, this is applesauce. Applesauce has a sweet taste, doesn't it? And then give your baby a chance to just respond. Let that conversation, let it be a conversation. Don't feel like you just have to talk. But you name it, you're naming what your child is interested in, you're naming what you're doing, or what you see your child is doing, or even how they might be feeling. That your baby is crying, you're hearing the cry as a hunger cry, and maybe you say to your baby, I know you're hungry right now, I'm fixing your food, or whatever, right? But it's that taking turns. That's the serve and return part.
Yes.
It's a conversation. And we want to keep that conversation going back and forth with responding for as long as the child is interested. So again, we loop back around to what Harvard has shared with us and what Lorna has shared with us, the importance of observing. When your child is done, they're done, and let them be done. It's absolutely okay. Maybe their attention has been drawn to something else. Maybe they need to take just a brief rest. We all take brain breaks, babies do too, right? But then we go back to step one. So it's this constant loop of just being aware of when are those teachable moments, when are those moments for play and for human interaction that are so, so important in developing language, but also developing social skills, developing emotional regulation. As you are calm and regulated with your baby's going to co-regulate and develop that same sense of calm. And that's a skill that we all need more of in our lives.
That's for sure. That's for sure.
Yeah, especially these days. So next slide.
Okay. Whoops, maybe. Wait a minute. It's not doing what
Okay.
it do. It will though in a
Sometimes
second.
you have to click on it again.
Yeah, there. Oh,
There
there
we
it is.
go. Yeah, exactly. So it's when we think about language, we're thinking about oral language. When we're thinking about literacy, we're thinking about written language. But I
Okay.
think what's really, really important to keep in mind is that language precedes literacy. We can't really at any point engage in written language if we don't have this firm, rich oral language. And it starts with receptive language. And so serve and return is helping that. You're helping your child at any age, really, develop and get more sophisticated in their reception of language. So we're modeling, we're engaging in this human communication. We're also teaching vocabulary. Just in a very natural, indirect way, we're teaching vocabulary. We're teaching syntax, the function of words in the English language, the order in which the language that we are speaking to our child has an order to it. So in English, the adjectives come before the noun, right, in describing the noun. In French, we say the noun first and then the adjective. And what is remarkable, and that we know more and more and more and more about this absorbent mind, this absorbing language, is that children will quite naturally absorb whatever language they are exposed to. So if you are a bilingual or even a trilingual family, your child is naturally absorbing in a receptive way each one of those languages. It's amazing. This brain is developing so quickly.
Yes.
So with the gradual development of expressive language, now your child has the motor development or oral motor development and has put that together with their babbling and the conversations that you have had and all that they have heard from you and watching your mouth to be able to communicate their needs and their wants more with words, less with cries, still some crying, of course, but with words as well. They're able to engage in a conversation in a different way. We've moved beyond babbling to, maybe in a very rudimentary way, asking a question or sharing information with you. They are developing the order of the way that language works, whatever language it is. But what's fascinating, and again, Dr. Montessori observed this, she referred to it as an explosion of language, because toddlers through early childhood, and I honestly believe continuing through elementary and adolescence, the rate at which children develop vocabulary is astounding.
Yeah.
Right? Really, really is.
Really is. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I see why she used the word explosion. It's not necessarily a word that we would use these days particularly, but just this very, very, very rapid development of vocabulary and using oral language and that transition from receptive to expressive. So, do we have any questions or any comments before we go on?
Take the questions right now. We don't have any questions, but I know people are out there thinking. If you do have a question, please go ahead and write it into this area on your control panel. And while you're thinking about that, I just want to say sort of going off from what Christine just said about vocabulary. Read to your children, and I know she's probably going to tell you this in 2 minutes, but read to your children and read interesting stories that have, a lot of wonderful vocabulary, because our language is beautiful. And as she said, they are absorbing all this vocabulary. And so when you're reading to them, they are absorbing even more vocabulary
Right.
in whatever it is you're reading. So Christine, I'll just be quiet now because you're probably going to talk about
No,
that.
no, but that's fine. And it reminded me of something that I didn't say that I think both of us would want to say. And that is because children are absorbing language, we want to use the same kind of language with them that we would use with an older child or with an adult. So a dog is a dog, not a doggy, right?
Right.
We don't, particularly in Montessori, we use the real terms for things, the real names for things. And if you have chosen Montessori education for your child at this point, one of the things that you will find is that, when your child gets to the early childhood level, they'll come home and they'll say, "Mommy, did you know that plants have photosynthesis?"
That's right.
They know what it means, because we use real language. We don't use baby talk. Now, there's a difference between creating words that are baby talk versus the Lauren, I'm not remembering the name of it exactly, but it's parentese, I think it's called, something like that, where
Yeah.
we tend to talk in a little bit higher a voice and a little bit more sing-songy with infants and toddlers. That has been shown, particularly for infants, to be really valuable to their language development.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Interesting.
yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Christine, we know that when we sing a song in our classrooms, like a cleanup song or a get rid of the line song, children remember it longer and in a different way. Their brain is taking it in a different way than when we just say things to them. And so that makes sense to me, what you just said about this, that it's a little bit higher voice and it's got a little
Right.
bit of a rhythm or a flow to it. And
Uh-huh.
children remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, okay, let's go on to the next slide.
All righty. Let me see if I can get down there. Yes. Okay.
Okay, yay. Okay, so as your child is developing expressive language and is still developing in their receptive language, as we all are all of our lives, we might hear a word in conversation, or you might hear a word in something that you're watching on TV or something, and now you've got a new vocabulary word as well. It's not all that different for our children. But when we're talking about emergent literacy, one of the first things that we can think about is what's called phonological awareness. It's the ability to identify and manipulate sound, is really the definition of it. So I put a couple of ideas on here of just games that you could play with your toddler and your young, 3, maybe 4-year-old child would be interested, or at any age they might be interested. And one thing you can do is just pick up some objects around the house. Maybe some make a sound and some don't. And you help your child distinguish the difference between sound and no sound. Or maybe you extend that and you put a few, 3 or 4 objects in a basket or on a tray, or whatever, that make sound. And you lay those out. Maybe you even give the vocabulary for them. Let's say they're little instruments or something. And you ask a child, close your eyes. I'm going to make a sound. And you pick up one of the objects and you make the sound. And then you lay it back down. Open your eyes. Which one made the sound?
Yeah.
And give your child the opportunity to play with what are the sources of language. You can turn it into a sequence game. This time I'm going to make 2 sounds. I wonder if you can make the 2 sounds when I'm done. right? Just play with it, just have fun with it.
Mm-hmm.
So those are some ideas. Clapping out or tapping a sequence, and then ask your child to repeat the same sequence. Now, in Montessori, we talk about teaching from simple to complex.
Mm-hmm.
And so, the first time that you're doing this with a young child, it might be, and can your child repeat that? And then it can be as complicated as you want it to be. Give your child a turn too. Let them clap out a sequence for you and see if you can repeat their sound sequence with your hands. Think about helping your child learn to follow directions, simple to complex. We're going to give our younger child one direction at a time. When we give, sometimes we have a tendency as adults, especially if we're feeling a little rushed, right? We might say, even to a toddler, go brush your teeth, then put on your pajamas, and then take out the book that you want me to read to you. And they can't do all of that. They're not used to processing that much information. So building up their ability to follow directions by giving just one small direction at a time. And maybe we model it first and we teach them how to do it so that then we say, it's time to brush your teeth. By now, your toddler knows how to reach their toothbrush and how to put some toothpaste on there and wet it and begin to brush their teeth. But they had to learn that whole sequence. And it didn't happen just one time, right?
That's right.
As Lorna said, the importance of singing songs. And children love to make up songs, and children love it even more when we make up songs.
Yes, they do.
I found it's something that I could do when I was teaching an early childhood classroom and there weren't any other adults around. But when you're with your child or with your children, and sometimes we can be a little bit sillier around our children than we would want to be around an adult. And just make up a song about your child,
Mm-hmm.
or make up a song about what they're doing, or that. Rhyming is a really important phonological awareness skill. And there's different schools of thought about this. Some people think that maybe if we expose children to rhyming, they will understand that rhyming words are words that sound the same at the end. It doesn't really matter if they can explain to you a definition, but that they hear that bat and cat rhyme, and we label it as a rhyming word. I've worked with some children that didn't really develop a firm grasp of rhyming until they just developed it. And sometimes it would be like I would teach it and I would teach it and I would teach it, and the child just wasn't happening. And then they'd come into school one day and they'd say, "Christine, bat and cat," and laugh. And I just think it was something that happened in their brain overnight. But play around with rhyming, play around with taking terms and making silly rhymes, and just playing with the idea of sound.
Mm-hmm.
Is a really important bridge from oral language to written language. Okay,
Very
next
nice.
slide.
Let's see. Come on. Oh, it's not wanting to do it. So there we go.
There we go. Okay. So as Lorna mentioned a little while ago, we do want to engage our children in understanding that those squiggly lines on a piece of paper can be converted to oral language. Mm. It's not that we're going to teach any of that, but we're just, again, the absorbent mind, we're exposing children to reading together every single day. Yeah. And I would like to recommend that you maybe have maybe 2 to 5 of your child's favorite books out, and maybe only introduce one book at a time. Children love to repeat. Children love to hear the same story over and over and over and over again. My daughter's favorite book when she was a little under 2 was Goodnight Moon. Yeah. And every night, we had to read Goodnight Moon, and she would read it along with me. She wasn't reading, she wasn't even looking at the words, but she had remembered the sequence. of the language in that book. So reading every day, as Lorna said, it contributes to vocabulary development, but it's also modeling and teaching our children the care of books.
Yes.
We want them to develop a love of books. So we're carefully turning the page. When the book is done, then we are modeling and we're asking maybe the child to help us and have them do it independently over time. Put that book away. Here's where it goes on the shelf. And they put it away. As you're just going about your business, if your child is noticing print in the environment, then, I've had many parents who said, my child is able to read the word McDonald's. Like, oh, how wonderful. You must have noticed at one point that your child pointed to those big golden arches and you said, that's McDonald's. And your child automatically made that connection. So it's not that the child's reading it, but they're recognizing that print communicates oral language. And that's the most important way that we can support them, along with everything else that we've talked about. And then just, in those moments when your child is concentrating on something and they're engaged in their own individual play, maybe you're sitting there reading a book. Mm-hmm. And because they're who they are, they're going to look at you every now and then, make sure that you're still there, make sure that you're still connected with them in a sense that they're doing their thing and you're doing yours. And what yours is reading a book. You're modeling. How wonderful that is. As children begin to emerge in literacy, they might pick up a book on their own and pretend that they're reading it.
Yes.
And they're just making up whatever. It might be tied to the illustration, maybe not. It might be that they're repeating the book from memory. That's fine. Mm-hmm. They're gradually understanding, again, that print represents oral language. And that goes along with this rapid development of vocabulary. One of the things that's really, really fascinating to me in the course that I teach for Montessori educators is that this idea of oral language being a foundation to written language, 4 out of 5 adults will say that when they are reading, they hear the inner voice reading that book. They are hearing their oral language in their mind's eye, if you will. So we never lose that. It is written language is just a translation of oral language. And at some point, your child will learn the code when they're ready, when they're interested. And there's no reason to make that happen before they're ready, really. Lorna, I'm not sure if there's a next slide or not, honestly, but let's see if there is. And if not, then there we go. So whether you're reading a book or whether you're cooking with a child, or in this photograph, they're carving pumpkins. We'll be doing that before you know it.
Yeah.
And they're using their oral language with their friends at school. So your child might come home every single day with a new word, and you can just celebrate that and just know that you are being such a wonderful and supportive and loving parent. So there we go. So
thank you, Christine. Wonderful information. We had Heba she put in here, and I'm not sure, I'll read it to you and you see what you think. She said, I'd like to add to talk to a child in the adult voice, not the baby voice. And I'm not sure if she didn't understand that part of our conversation. So do you want to go over that a little bit more?
Yeah, so thank you for that comment and for that question and that suggestion. The difference is not in the vocabulary. We are using the same vocabulary, developmentally appropriate, of course, but we're not using baby talk like words like oftentimes we put E on the end of things, the doggies and the birdies are singing. Well, the birds are singing, right? But that adult voice is, right now I'm using an adult voice, okay? But if I was talking with a child, if I was teaching an early childhood classroom, or particularly a toddler classroom, and Lorna has more experience with this than I do, but I might say, look at this orange. This orange is a kind of fruit. We're going to cut this orange up and we're each going to take a taste. I wouldn't say it that way to an adult, right? Not just because they've already experienced an orange, but because research tells us, and you can read about this if you go to the Center for the Developing Child at harvard.edu. They talk about the research that has been done about this natural tendency to talk to babies and young children in a different kind of voice than we use with just adults that we're talking to. And that seems to, what the research shows is that seems to be a contributor to the development of both receptive and expressive language with children.
Terrific. So, thank you. Yeah. I hope that helps, Heba. What I wanted to do now is I wanted to just let you know what we will be up to in the next couple of weeks here on the Montessori Family Life webinar series. One thing is next week we are going to take a little break. It's a Labor Day break. Even though Labor Day is on Monday, we're going to also take a break on Tuesday. So there will not be a webinar next Tuesday. But the week after that, we will be doing courageous conversations between parents and teachers, because soon, before you know it, you're going to be having your fall conference. And in the meantime, you want to actually build relationship with the teacher. And so this is a wonderful webinar, and our speaker will be Cassie Mackey, who has done a lot of work with this idea of courageous conversations. And so please join us on September 12th for that particular webinar.
Can I just jump in real quickly? Cassie is a wonderful, just wealth of information, just a wonderful, warm person. And if you can make it on the 12th, I really encourage you to do that. She's fantastic.
That's terrific. Well, thank you so much, Christine, for joining us today. You've given us a lot to think about and to put into practice if we have young children and even older children. And so we thank you for coming. And I'd also like to thank all of our guests. Thank you for showing up today and for joining us for this webinar. I'll have a good week and I'll see you on the 12th. Bye for now.
Bye-bye.